Hey, amazing viewers, I love connecting with you all around the world. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share will leave you inspired and ready to take control of your own life. In today's story, you'll hear about an incredible twist that no one saw coming. Also, if this is your first time here, press the subscribe button and join our incredible journey. A frantic cry for help. It was a hot afternoon when I stumbled upon something that would change both our lives forever. I was walking down a narrow, quiet street when I heard a faint sound, a desperate, almost pitiful cry. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before. Not a loud meow, but a hoarse, weak rasp, as though someone or something was begging for help. Curiosity gnawed at me, and I followed the sound, my heart pounding with both dread and concern. Turning the corner, I saw her. Beneath an old, rusted motorcycle, a tiny creature lay on the cracked pavement. Her fur, once likely soft and fluffy, was now a tangled mess of dirt and grime. Her body was barely a shadow of what it should have been, her ribs visibly showing, and her movements sluggish and labored. But it was her eyes that caught my attention, big, wide, and filled with a mixture of fear and helplessness. She was looking right at me, trying with all her strength to get my attention. I could see her making one last, desperate attempt to survive. She wasn't giving up yet. My heart broke in that instant. This wasn't just a stray cat. This was a soul in need, a creature that had been left to fend for itself in the harsh world. I took a cautious step forward, unsure of what I should do. But when she weakly lifted her head, my instincts kicked in. I had to help her. I couldn't just leave her there to suffer. I rushed to my car and grabbed the first thing I could find. A cardboard box. It wasn't much, but it was something. Gently, I scooped her up, feeling the frailty of her body against my hands. She didn't resist, her body too weak to fight back. She let out a faint mewl, the sound barely audible. As I placed her in the box, she didn't move much. It was as if all her energy had been drained, leaving only the will to survive. I drove to the nearest vet, hoping for a miracle. The entire ride, I kept glancing at her, her tiny form barely visible in the box. I wanted so desperately for her to pull through. She deserved a chance at life, just as much as any other creature. When we arrived at the clinic, the vet didn't mince words. The moment he examined her, he said the words that no one ever wants to hear about an animal they've just rescued. Her condition is very serious. She's undernourished, dehydrated, and we're not sure she'll make it. My heart sank. I could see the look in the vet's eyes, the uncertainty, the sadness, the acknowledgement that this little life could slip away at any moment. But I refused to give up on her. "Do whatever it takes," I said, my voice more firm than I felt. "She deserves a chance." The doctor nodded, though I could tell he was skeptical. But he didn't argue. He agreed to start treatment immediately. I stayed with her throughout the examination, watching helplessly as she was hooked up to fluids and monitored closely. Her frailty was heartbreaking. She didn't look like she had the strength to survive the night, let alone thrive. But somehow, something told me that she wasn't going to give up so easily. She had already fought too hard to let it end this way. I left the clinic that night with a heavy heart, knowing that I had done what I could, but the outcome was still uncertain. I couldn't stop thinking about her, though. How could I? She had already fought through so much. Her will to survive was palpable, and I couldn't ignore it. That night, I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with the thought of her tiny, fragile body fighting for life. The next morning, I returned to the clinic, hoping for a small sign of improvement. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what the doctor might say, but deep down, I knew I couldn't turn back now. And then, the doctor gave me the first piece of good news since I had found her. "She made it through the night," he said with a faint smile. "She's still weak, but she's a fighter." That was all I needed to hear. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The little stray cat had given me a glimmer of hope, and in return, I vowed to fight for her, just as she had fought for her life. It was in that moment I realized that this wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a partnership. We were both struggling to survive in a world that often felt indifferent to the weak and the broken. But together, we would make it through. And that was just the beginning of a journey that neither of us would ever forget. A glimmer of hope. The second morning after I found her, I walked into the clinic with a sense of cautious optimism. I wasn't expecting a miracle, but after the news that she had survived the night, a small seed of hope began to sprout within me. It felt like a delicate thread connecting us. Me, the stranger who had found her, and her, the tiny cat who had fought so fiercely just to be seen. I walked up to the nurse at the front desk, my heart racing with every second. She led me down the hall to the examination room, where the little cat, who I now called Jick, was being kept in an incubator to keep her warm. I couldn't help but hold my breath when I walked in. There she was, still so fragile, her little body wrapped in blankets. She looked smaller than ever, her bones sticking out sharply. But the most important thing was that she was alive. The nurse gently lifted her out of the incubator and placed her on the soft pad, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Cheech's eyes were wide open. She was staring at me, not with fear this time, but with a sort of quiet curiosity, as if she recognized me. I didn't know how she felt, or if she was in pain, but in that moment I felt a sense of connection with her that was indescribable. She wasn't just a stray cat anymore. She was a survivor, and I was there to help her keep fighting. The doctor came in soon after and ran another round of tests. His expression was still serious, but there was a flicker of relief in his eyes as he spoke. She's still incredibly weak, but she's eating on her own now. That's a good sign. We're going to keep her under observation for a bit longer, but at least for today, things are looking better. As he spoke, I watched Jick carefully. She was still unsteady, her movements slow and cautious, but there was a spark in her gaze, something that told me she wasn't giving up. In fact, she seemed to be trying harder than ever to get better. Her little paws twitched now, and then, like she was trying to stand or push herself forward. She was showing me, in her own way, that she was ready to fight. The first time I fed her was a small victory. I carefully placed a shallow bowl of milk in front of her and watched as she drank it eagerly, each little gulp a sign of progress. Her strength was returning, and though it would be a long road ahead, I knew she was gaining the will to live. I couldn't help but smile as I watched her. Chichi's resilience was incredible. Despite her frailty, despite the odds stacked against her, she wasn't giving up. She was fighting in the only way she knew how. And I had made a promise to her, to never give up either. Over the next couple of days, Jick continued to improve, slowly but surely. She began eating more, her appetite growing with each meal. Her little body, though still weak, started to show signs of life, her fur softening a little, her eyes brightening. I could see her becoming more alert with every passing hour. I remember the first time she tried to stand on her own. It was on the third day. She had been resting quietly, curled up in a blanket, but suddenly I noticed her lifting her head and trying to stretch her legs. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but it was the first sign of real hope. Her body wasn't ready for anything too strenuous yet, but she was determined to keep going. I couldn't believe how strong she was, how fiercely she was fighting for her life. It was then that I realized something profound. The strength Jick had was something I couldn't quite explain. She had no voice to cry out her suffering, no one to tell her she was important. Yet, in her silence, she was teaching me something about resilience. Every day she fought, every small movement she made, she reminded me that life is worth fighting for, no matter how hard it gets. By the fifth day, Jick had become a little more stable. I took her for a bath, a gentle one, of course, to help soothe her aching body. She was a trooper, completely cooperative, though I could tell she was still exhausted. The water, warm and calming, seemed to help. She sat quietly, watching the world around her, as if taking in all the new experiences. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about helping a stray cat. It was about discovering a part of myself that I had never truly seen before. It was about learning to appreciate the fight, the quiet resilience that exists in all of us. Chick wasn't just a survivor, she was a teacher. Every day, I began to understand her more. And in return, she was teaching me to appreciate the small victories in life, the moments that remind us that no matter how tough things get, we have the strength to push forward. Chick was a living, breathing testament to that truth. The journey was far from over, but I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't leave her side. Just as she had started to find strength again, so had I. Together, we would continue to fight. Together, we would keep moving forward. The miracle unfolds. By the 7th day, something incredible was happening. Chick was no longer the fragile, helpless kitten I had first found under that motorcycle. She was still small, still recovering, but her spark, a resilience I hadn't fully understood before, was beginning to shine through. It was as though the tiny body that had once been so weak was now finding its rhythm again. Every time I walked into the clinic, I expected to see the same fragile creature. But when I looked into her eyes, there was a newfound energy, a quiet strength that left me speechless. I couldn't explain it. It was as if the will to live that she had clung to so desperately was now blossoming into a force of its own. The doctors were amazed at how quickly she was progressing. The progress was slow, but each small improvement felt like a giant leap. On the 7th day, I received the news that Chick was ready to go home. Her health had improved so much that the doctor was confident she could leave the clinic. Of course, there were still things to monitor, still so much healing to be done. But her vitality, her determination, had turned things around. When I arrived at the clinic that day, I could hardly contain my excitement. I walked into the room and saw Chick, sitting upright in her bed, staring up at me. Her fur was starting to look a little softer, a little shinier. Her eyes, those beautiful bright eyes, were full of life. She had made it. She had defied the odds. "Are you ready to go home?" I asked, my voice filled with emotion. She didn't answer, but in that moment, it felt like she understood exactly what I was saying. She was ready. The ride back home was quiet, except for the soft sound of her breathing, steady and calm. As we drove, I couldn't help but think about everything she had gone through. From the moment I found her, weak and barely holding on, to now, this little cat, who had somehow found the strength to not only survive but thrive. Her journey had been nothing short of miraculous. When we finally arrived, I set her down gently inside the house, letting her take in her new surroundings. The cool air from the air conditioning felt good on her fur, and she settled by the doorway, her little body still a little wobbly but much stronger than before. She took a deep breath, her tiny chest rising and falling with the new air in her lungs. It was as if she was breathing in the hope of a future she had almost lost. Over the next few days, I watched her grow stronger with each passing moment. At first, she spent most of her time resting, but every now and then, she would get up and explore. Her movements were still tentative, but she was starting to show more interest in the world around her. It was a slow process, but it was happening. One of the first things I noticed was how she loved to lie in front of the fan, letting the cool air blow across her. It wasn't just about comfort. It was as if she was basking in the peace that had eluded her for so long. The sounds of the house, the hum of the air conditioning, the quiet of the room, it was all new to her, but each day she seemed more and more at home, more and more comfortable. By the 10th day, something truly remarkable happened. Chick began to eat with vigor. What had once been a few hesitant bites had now turned into full meals, devoured with an eagerness that reminded me of the hunger for life that she had shown from the beginning. Every meal, every bite, felt like a victory, proof that she was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. I remember watching her one evening as she ran around the house, her little paws skittering across the floor. She was playing with the toys I had bought for her, her body now filled with enough energy to explore her new world. She wasn't the broken, scared little creature I had first met. She was becoming something more, something beautiful. It was around this time that I gave her a name, Jish. The name felt right. It symbolized her journey, her fight to survive, her resilience. In Chinese, Jik can mean perseverance. It was a name that reflected everything she had been through, everything she was becoming. Every day, she grew more curious, more playful. She would often sit at the door, peering outside, as if she were watching the world go by, perhaps dreaming of the adventures ahead. There were moments when I thought about how far she had come. From the sickly, fragile little thing I had found under a motorcycle, to this brave, spirited little cat who had fought through it all. And just as she was healing, I began to realize something else. Jik had become more than just a survivor. She had become a source of inspiration. Watching her fight, watching her come back to life piece by piece, had taught me something I didn't expect. It had taught me the true meaning of resilience. I had gone into this thinking I was saving her. But the truth was, she had saved me too. Her strength, her courage, had become a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my life. She had taught me that no matter how difficult life becomes, no matter how hopeless things may seem, we can always find the strength to fight back. And in Jich's case, it was a fight worth every second. The power of resilience. As the days passed, Jich's transformation was nothing short of awe-inspiring. I watched her grow more vibrant, more confident with each passing moment. She was no longer just a survivor. She had become a living testament to resilience. Her playful nature, once lost in the depths of illness, had returned full force. She would chase after little toys, pounce on my feet as I walked by, and find joy in the simplest of things, like the crinkle of a plastic bag or the sunlight streaming through the window. But one thing stood out more than anything. Every time I looked at her, I saw a reflection of something greater than just a cat who had overcome the odds. I saw the undeniable truth that no matter how broken we are, no matter how many times life knocks us down, there's always the possibility to rise again. It might not be easy, and it might take time, but we have within us the strength to rebuild ourselves, to persevere. Jich had faced the darkness, the uncertainty, the loneliness. She had been alone, abandoned, and in pain. But now, here she was, running, playing, and exploring the world around her. What was once a fragile, almost lifeless being had transformed into a symbol of hope, of determination. Every moment with her reminded me of this powerful truth. Resilience doesn't come from avoiding pain or difficulty. It comes from facing it head-on and choosing to rise despite it. As I watched her curled up in the sun one afternoon, content and at peace, I realized something that had taken me longer to understand. It wasn't just about the physical healing, though that was a part of it. It was about the healing of the spirit. Jik had fought not just for her life, but for the chance to experience happiness, to feel love, and to be seen. She had fought because deep down, she knew she deserved more than a life of struggle. She deserved to thrive. And in a way, so do we all. The journey she and I had been on together had shown me that sometimes the most important battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. It's not always easy to stay hopeful when the world seems against us. It's not always clear where the road will take us, or whether we'll make it to the end. But like Jik, we can choose to keep going. We can choose to fight with everything we have. Jik had been through so much, yet she still had so much joy to give. She had found a new home, a new family, and a new purpose. Her story wasn't just about survival. It was about reclaiming her right to live fully, to embrace every moment, no matter how small. It was a lesson for all of us. In a world that often feels overwhelming and uncertain, we all have the capacity for resilience. Like Jik, we can face the hardest of challenges, and instead of giving up, we can rise stronger. And in doing so, we can inspire others to do the same. Today, Jik is no longer that tiny, sickly kitten I found on the pavement. She's a vibrant, full-of-life cat, whose story is one of hope and healing. And as I look at her, playing with her toys or chasing after a butterfly in the yard, I am reminded of the one thing that truly matters. No matter how many times life knocks us down, we have the power to get back up. It's not about how many times we fall. It's about how many times we rise. Jichi's fight for survival was more than a story of healing. It was a story of the strength we all have inside of us, waiting to be unlocked. So, the next time life feels overwhelming, remember Jake. Remember her journey. Remember that the greatest gift we have is the ability to keep moving forward, no matter the challenges we face. Because in the end, it's not about surviving. It's about thriving. And if a little cat can do it, so can we. Thank you for following Jichi's story. May it inspire you to never give up, to fight for what you deserve, and to always keep moving forward, no matter the odds.